Welcome to Of Sound Mind and Spirit. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Lisa. We're sisters walking together on a journey of faith. We're not perfect.
We definitely don't have all the answers. We're inviting you to walk with us as we explore ways we can better know and grow in our faith together. Welcome back to another episode from Of Sound Mind and Spirit. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Shelley.
Lisa, I'd like to welcome our wonderful guest, a good dear friend. Please welcome Andrea Bear, an award-winning author and podcaster.
Hi guys, how are you doing? I'm so excited to see you girls. I miss talking to you and catching up on everything.
I have to say, Andrea, I'm almost embarrassed that we haven't had you on before now.
Oh, well, this was a perfect time.
Yes.
So, we've had lots of side conversations, so God's timing is perfect.
Exactly.
So, and I haven't had you guys on my podcast. So what does
That's
that
true.
say about me?
Not for lack of trying, though.
You'll get there in your time.
One day, in my time.
Yes.
So, Andrea, we invited you to come today in part because you have an award-winning book, The Grieving Daughters Club, and also a podcast with another friend of ours, Jennifer Thomas, called Morning Glories. And I want to tell our listeners a little bit about you and how you've used your experiences of life to know and grow in your faith. And I know that's a very open-ended question. So if you could just give listeners just a little bit about you and how you were raised in the faith.
Sure. So, well, first of all, I want to say to get into writing and to podcasting, this was not something I said, hey, I'm going to do this one day. I'm a history teacher. I'm a mom of 3 daughters, but I was raised Catholic. Had all my sacraments, went to Catholic school, went to Catholic high school. My mom was a convert. She willingly joined the faith. My grandparents were staunch Catholics. You don't get married in the faith. We don't acknowledge your wedding. Like that level. Okay. And I say that with all the love in my heart. God rest their soul. But my mom willingly embraced it, and she became very involved in our school. She became very involved in our community, and my dad worked very hard. So I didn't see him a lot growing up. So my mom was really a big presence in my childhood, especially at our school. And so I celebrated the Catholic community because that was our family, and my mom, not having really a strong spiritual background, really embraced it. And that became an extension of our family. I mean, some people say, your church is your family. It really was. I mean, all of our friends, everything. And so I just grew to love the church. We had the nuns from the Sacro Custado order. I love these ladies. I got in trouble by them so many times, but they loved me. They just were wonderful women. And so I was a cradle Catholic, but I was never a Catholic that sought. And I emphasize that because we grow up and we take for granted a lot of times the things that are given to us. And sometimes that can be a travesty because when we have everything, we don't always appreciate what we have. Mm-hmm. And so about 2015, my mom was diagnosed with a glioblastoma stage 4 brain cancer. This was terminal. There was no cure. The only thing that we could do was prolong her life. So she had 2 brain surgeries. She had chemo. She had radiation. And my father at this time, my parents are, towards the end of their retirement, they wanted to travel and they really didn't get to do much of that. My father had also had his own diseases. He had muscular dystrophy, which is kind of rare, especially for a grown person. It's typically something children get. It's not MS, but it affected his limbs. So he was very strong, very athletic, hyper in a sense. He was always doing something. And this disease kind of took hold of him maybe I'd probably say about 10 years before my mom was diagnosed. But it could be managed through exercise. And so he would go to swim class and he would just try to maintain his health. So when my mom was diagnosed, it just really rocked me to the core. And I won't go into the whole story because good Lord knows there's just so much of it. But that same year, another relative of mine expressed that they no longer believed in God. And so here I am sitting in the middle of my mom has been given this death sentence, and I have this relative who doesn't have a faith anymore. And I start to question, like, because that put a seed of doubt in me. Is there a God? What's going to happen? Where is she going to go? And I do what I do best in times of chaos. I add things to my plate. I fill it up with good intentions and busyness. And I open a women's ministry group at my church. I did a gala for my daughter's school. 600 people in attendance. Like I don't know how to just sit and be. So I had to fill it up with all of these good things. Like, some people turn to alcohol and drugs. I turned to community because that's what I had known. And so in the midst of all of this, I am burnout. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. But I'm seeking God. I am seeking him. I know he's there. I don't know what that's going to look like. And then in 2018, I'm trying to make sure I do my math correctly. My mom had died, and it was just really, it really crushed me. I was very close with my mom. She was my cheerleader. She lifted me up. She gave me all this, love, and she complimented me. She was my, she was my cheerleader. And so then when she wasn't there, that void just really came in. And I just was in a lost place. I was trying to find purpose. I didn't know what direction. And anyway, I had gone to this Catholic women's conference, and I had saw a friend that I'd known, and she was a speaker at the conference, which I had no idea that she'd done that. And she was writing, and something came over me in that moment. And I said, I could do all that, because I had been kind of, see, another thing to add to the list. And I had really been searching for something. And the thing with grief is it stops you in your tracks, whether you want it to or not. When you have to acknowledge that that part of your life is over and you have to recreate it, everything else around you starts to kind of break down. And I realized I couldn't continue to operate with all this busyness, but I didn't know how to just do nothing, because I wasn't used to that. You have to practice sometimes the art of just doing nothing and being. And so I remember one day I was in my backyard and I just sat and I was like, okay, God, I'm doing nothing. This is boring. Like I didn't know how, So I had gone to this conference and my family was telling me, you're never home. You're always doing stuff. And so I had gone to this conference and I had seen her and she was speaking and she was writing. And I thought, okay, writing is something I can do at home, and I can still be busy, but I'm doing it now in a place where I'm present. And so I had contacted my friend and asked her, information about it. And she was writing for Catholic Mom, which you two ladies know so well. And so she gave me the information and I reached out, and it took 6 months before I got the courage to start putting anything out there. And when I did, I immediately got a call from Relevant Radio, and they wanted to interview me. And I'm like, for what? Like, I don't know. And so they interviewed me on my article. And then the next month rolled around and I got called again. And I called my friend, her name's Courtney. And I'm like, does this happen to you? Like, do you get called all the time? She's like, I've never been called. And so I just took that as a sign of the Holy Spirit. But what I also realized, this kind of took me out of my grief, not completely, but what it did is it gave me this new direction. And then, but little did I know that there was going to be so many lows coming after that. And I mean, if you want me to share the whole story, I can. It's really long, but I'll try to summarize. I got very involved in praying the rosary, and I was so engaged in praying it and convincing people. But I will tell you, I didn't believe in the rosary. I did it because everybody else was doing it. I saw this Catholic community online, and I just didn't feel this. I couldn't see what everybody else saw in the beauty of it. And I had replaced my busyness out in the world with my busyness in my mind, within my heart. And I just kind of went into this dark place. And I realized as I was doing that, my writing, my spiritual writing was all like, it wasn't coming to me, because you can't fake that. You can't fake spiritual writing, and nothing was coming to me. And it was just a really dark place. My grief would continue for the next few years. And my father, interestingly enough, his health started to kind of decline more. And he and I were not always compatible. I loved my dad, but I didn't always like him. And I found that he made things so much more difficult. My mom was an easy person to take care of. My dad, everything had to be his way. Even simple tasks, helping him around the house, had to be done a certain style. And let's just say, if going to church is one thing, living a faithful life is another. And my dad tested every virtue that I didn't have. And I'll just keep it, I'll keep it G-rated. But it got really bad at points. And it was just a really hard time. But in the meantime, I'm still praying the rosary. I felt this heaviness, and I felt this darkness. And then my family kind of noticed that, I'm all about writing, and I'm all about my faith. And I wanted to be like super Catholic. Like, I wanted a homeschool. I wanted my kids, with wooden blocks, and not watching TV. And we celebrate every feast day of a saint, and nobody was having it. And they're like, who is this lady? What have you done with my mother? What have you done with my wife? I had exploded in my faith. And what I learned in some of that is my grief was, I had been trying to avoid that grief. So I kept filling it up with other things. And everybody does it, but they do it in different things. Some people turn to the more obvious vices, food, alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever. Mine were all good things. It was harder to see the grief was there, but it was harder for me to address it because I kept justifying it with all these good things. And finally, my daughter actually pointed out to me, and God love her. I didn't like this at the time, but she's like, you're a hypocrite. And she's like, you present yourself all holy and pious, but you come home and you're angry and you're bitter and you're upset and you're, and I was so angry. I was, why can't my family cooperate with me? Why can't my father, doesn't he see all the pain that I'm going through? Why can't he just get on board? And I never, ever asked him how he was doing in his grief. He'd lost his wife. He was losing his physical ability to move. And my dad rarely complained about it. I mean, he was a complainer in general, but it was not like a woe is me. It was, he was very strong throughout all of that. He was mentally strong. He never cried. And that was where I kind of got upset with him, because I wanted him to grieve the same way I did. I wanted him to be sad like me and be emotional. And, I wanted him to write articles with me. Who knows? I just wanted him to be like me, and he wasn't. And so it just brought out, I wanted everybody to cooperate with me. and nobody did. And I had formed this friendship with a very dear priest friend of mine, Father Joe, and it was an unexpected friendship. And my confessions with him were 45 minutes. And he would just counsel me and talk to me, and they were just so purifying. And one day, this was about 2.5, almost 3 years after I had lost my mom, and I was, doing everything that I needed to do. And I had gone to confession one day, and I finally admitted to him, I just said, I've been praying the rosary for a long time. And I said, I don't think it's working. Like I said, in fact, I feel more miserable than when I started. I said, my husband and I are on the verge of divorce. My children don't like me. My father is just uncompliant. Like everything in my life is falling apart. And he smiled at me and he said, that's a good thing. And I couldn't understand what he meant by that. And he said, you're being purified. And I had no idea at the time what that meant. But I continued to pray that rosary. And as time progressed, my father's health got worse. And I should probably tell you, my dad and he was the only person at the time that willingly wanted to, without force, pray the rosary with me on a regular basis. And so, yeah, it was really powerful. And I would take him to UC Davis for his doctor's appointments, and we'd argue in the car. And the only thing that kept us quiet was we'd pray a rosary on the way up. And I cherish that. And so anyway, I'm kind of going pretty down the road, but it wasn't until somebody had introduced Our Lady of Sorrows that I started to have a connection with Mary. And if you look at this, Mary was a widow. Mary lost her son. Mary endured many, many difficult hardships in her life. And she did so with love. She did so with patience. She did so with true faith. She didn't question God's plan for her. And it wasn't until I started praying this very specific devotion to her under that title that Mary started to reveal herself to me. And it was for the first time, and if you're not familiar with the Seven Sorrows Chaplet, it goes through all the sorrows of Mary's life, starting with, the prophecy of Simeon in the temple and, the fleet front to Egypt, and then to, finding Jesus in the temple, and then going through the cross with Jesus, and then all the way to his death and burying him in the tomb. And when I started praying this, she showed me my children in those meditations, and I saw their pain. I saw the things that they were going through in their life at that time. And I just sobbed and I wept and I went, this is what it's about. Mary, because I couldn't relate to Mary. I could not relate to her. I looked at her kind of snobbishly. How could you understand what I'm going through? You had the child Jesus. He's perfect. He doesn't talk back to you. He doesn't call you a hypocrite. You had obedient parents to God. They don't challenge you. Joseph was right there with you, like you're not combative. And I just didn't think Mary could relate at all to me because of her perfection. And I realized it was in her sinlessness that she suffered even more, because she couldn't turn to vices. She couldn't turn to a bag of potato chips. She couldn't turn to, doing good deeds and running major events and podcasts. Like, she didn't do all that. She sat at the foot of the cross. She stayed there. She was silent. She wept with her son. She endured the pain. And that was like the game changer in my faith. And I will tell you, people who go through grief and they don't have a faith have a harder time processing and fully healing. And I don't mean that they can't get help and they don't, move forward, but it's not complete. And in my experience with, our grief podcast, I've learned that, all of these people have been going through hardships, but they've healed greatly by going through those steps. Because grief is body, mind, and soul. It's
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of these grief support groups that are more secular, they only deal with the body and the mind. They attempt to deal with the soul, but God is at the center of all of that. So Mary was really the breakthrough. And then, there's a whole other story after that, which I don't know how long your episode is, ladies, but we could just keep going.
I like the we. You have so much to unpack here. It's
Tons.
Yeah.
it's
Thank you for
overwhelming,
sharing.
Andrea.
You were very vulnerable there. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and on the surface, I always presented myself as a devoted churchgoer, which I was. But what I realized is faith is not just in name. We're in football season. My priest at our church always says this: are you a fan or are you a follower? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can be a fan of Jesus, but are you a follower? And I was a fan. I was fangirl number one. But to follow Christ is to carry that cross.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've said this, I've shared this with you offline. My mother showed me the cross. My father helped me carry the cross. And I realized once I embraced that, and it was hard. I'm not going to sit there and say, yay, I embraced the cross. Let's go. Carrying that cross is hard. And just like
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, I fell many times. I probably fell more than 3 times. Jesus fell only 3. I fell multiple times in that. It was really painful. It was painful also to see my father because I couldn't understand him. And, sometimes when you have the absence of somebody in your life, other people's personalities become more present. They come to the forefront. And I struggled with that. God, how could you take away the easier parent? How could you leave me with a parent that is challenging? He's grumpy. He purposely does things to prove a point to me. Like he even told me one time, I'm just out to prove you wrong. And, and we were combative a lot, but at the same time, I also saw a man who had lost his health. He'd lost his wife, and he never gave up. He continued to walk the walk. And I mean, he struggled, and that was hard. That was hard for me to watch. I'll be honest with you. There were times I couldn't bear seeing him in his state, a man that I had known that was so healthy most of his life. And then to see him, can't feed himself, have to get dressed, help wash his hair, just simple things. He had a wheelchair. You see your parents or anybody really for that matter, and then you see them in a different state, and there's a grief in that as well. So my writing, interestingly enough, when I wrote the book Grieving Daughters Club, was really because I didn't feel qualified at that time to tell anybody how to grieve. I was a hot mess myself. And I also as I mentioned before, devotional writing was not my calling. And so, but I knew that I was really good at storytelling and sharing experiences. And I saw this was women in my Bible study group. They were all sharing experiences of loss, and this was how we connected. And so I took those women and put them together into a story and shared a little bit about their lives. And some of it's, slightly fictional too. And I changed the names and changed the scenarios, but it was a form of healing. It helped me in one aspect. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't initially in my first edit write my father into the script because I was so pissed off at him. I was so angry with him. And finally, my editor was like, you need to write him in, like you need to write Abe father. If, put your personal and issues aside. This is a fictional story. You need to write that in. And so I wrote the dad that I wanted. And then I also wrote all the things that I knew that my own dad wanted. He wanted to travel, and he didn't get it. He couldn't do that. So so his character kind of embodied who we both wanted him to be, you know. But I met Jennifer. We were at a writers' conference, and we had connected, and she had also lost both of her parents. At this time, I hadn't lost my dad. And we had connected, and we'd shared the same experience. And we had talked about, there really weren't any resources at the time for grief in terms of a spiritual or a Catholic lens. And so somebody at the conference had said, if there was a YouTube channel or something, I would interview with them if it was about grief. And that idea stuck in my mind. And so I messaged her when we got home, and then we started this process. And so it's been about 2 years now. And I will tell you, the first year that we did this, we did a lot of, what's the word? Now I'm like drawing a blank. We did a lot of processing ourselves with our guest. I think I kind of took over a little bit and was like, we'd have somebody over and we'd make it all about us. And, but it was cathartic too, because we were learning through these people's stories. We were learning through their lives. And there was this one guest, I will tell you, and she still affects me to this day, is Rachel Muha. And she has a foundation. Her son was murdered. And the two men that killed her son were the same age as her son. He was in college, and they were from a completely different world. And at his sentencing, at the sentencing of these two men that had murdered her son, she forgave them. And that really stuck with me, that forgiveness. Because it's very easy when we are in a state of suffering and sorrow, and we feel that the world owes us something. It's very easy for us to want to be bitter. And she said, if I didn't forgive them, my family would watch me, and they would watch how I went through. And I knew that would affect them. And I always remember that. And I remember, and I don't know the timeline of this, but I remember one day I just felt like I was a horrible daughter. I felt like I was just so not, like I wasn't as dedicated to my father, because I loved him, but I didn't get along with him, and I struggled with him. And I started to kind of change how I approached him. I had to be a little bit less emotional and kind of more numb. And I would do things out of obedience, but I didn't like them. I just did them because I knew it had to be done. And one day I just said, I feel like I'm just this awful daughter. And my daughter said, same one too. She said, you're not an awful daughter. She says, you forgive your dad all the time. She's like, and sorry.
No.
She said, you forgive him. And I thought of Rachel. I thought of that, them watching us and how we act. That is me sharing my faith with my kids. They didn't want to hear me preach. They didn't want to hear me evangelize. They were never read anything that I wrote unless I forced it on them. But they were watching my faith in how I acted. And I felt like that was a turning point. And I realized that my walk with my father, those falls with the cross, weren't perfect, but it helped me carry that cross. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Andrea, I was wondering if we were being telepathically linked, because as you were saying something, I'd be thinking of something, and then you'd say it almost immediately. I was actually thinking, when you were saying that about your daughter, how you modeled, and that it was the same daughter from beginning to end there, how you modeled for them that it's okay, not okay in that grief to have all these feelings and to go through all these motions, and you showed them what you were doing, and she called you out on it.
Yes.
And that then by the time you've gone through this personal journey, your daughters will, when they are faced with a cross in their life, they will hopefully recognize, this is what my mom went through. This is, I know better how I want to try to handle this, or I know what my mom experienced that she shared with us. And now I know that I can take it from a different perspective, or I can take it from a stronger position, or recognize my own inner turmoil going through it. And that she told you that, going from, Mom, you're just a holier than thou hypocrite, to, Mom, you modeled for us what it means to love and forgive.
Yes. Yeah. And the funny part is, I always wanted my children to see my faith. I always wanted to, I'm a teacher, so I'm good at lecturing. I'm good at presenting things and trying to draw people in. And when you have a relationship with God, you can't control any of that. You are not the teacher. God is the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
God is the one that teaches the lesson. And you just have to be, if you are at all the facilitator, if he decides, you have to just be a participant. You have to be the student. And I'm learning that. I'm still learning that, let me tell you. I teach high school.
It kind of sounds like in the beginning, when you were filling all of this grief with busy, that God was waiting to teach you, and you were just the unruly student in the back of the class.
Yeah. I was the kid that, had the 504 and the IEP, and the kid that no teacher could figure out what to do with. And I think God looks at me like that sometimes and goes, what are we going to do with you? But I also am grateful. I'm going to tell you, I am grateful for all of that. There were 6 years between my parents passing. Mm-hmm. My dad passed last August 2024. And those were, in between their deaths, were some of the hardest years of my life. On the outside, you wouldn't see that, because I presented myself always put together. You still have to go. You still have to go to work. You still have to, attend to things. But interiorly, they were some of the hardest. And that last year before my dad's death, that's really where, so there's Simon, who carries the cross because he has to. Mm-hmm. And then there's Veronica, who meets Jesus and she wipes his face. And I realized in that last year, my dad's health was starting to kind of decline. His finances were a mess, and we were unsure of what was going to happen, because his health care, his care was just needing a lot more attention. And there were just so many unknowns. It was scary. And I just remember having this moment where I was like, you know what, God, I don't have any plan. I don't have any lesson ready. I don't have anything. And I have to give all of it to you. I said, I got nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how God works in those moments, because I had to completely let go. I had to be okay that my dad would fall. I had to be okay that his finances were in turmoil. I had to be okay that his health would be I had to be okay even if he died. And I know that sounds very hard. Mm-hmm. But when you're in a place, when you're on a faith journey, if you lead with fear, if you lead with control, God will slap you and put you right back on, the path and say, no, he will push you to the back of the line. Yes.
Go back and learn it again, Andrea.
Yes. And those 6 years was constantly going to the back of the line. It was constantly going to the back of the line. And that year, I just was like, I'm tired. I'm tired of repeating this. You get to a place where you're just tired. You're tired of learning the lesson. So you just submit. And I just remember going, okay, God, you have my full attention. I remember I was in the car and I'm just, thinking about all the stuff that my dad had already gone through. And I was was really tired. I was tired with my mom's health when she had died. I was tired with my dad's. I was tired with so many things. I didn't have the strength anymore. And I just remember going to him, and I remember there was also a peace, you know, let's see, March 2024. That was the week of Holy Week. My dad had fallen, and he'd had falls before, and he'd had, repairs and stuff, but he'd fallen. He fell on Holy Thursday really late at night, and I got a call that morning because he did not want them to call me. He did not want them to wake me up. He wanted me to sleep. And I got a call that he had broke his femur.
Oh.
And he had been sent to the hospital. And I, at the time, had planned a Marian consecration at my church. We were going to do it on Good Friday. I was in charge of it, still doing stuff, all good intentioned. And I remember in that moment saying, you know what? I'm not meant to be there. I need to be with my dad. I went to the cross. I did not go, even though it was good intention to be there, and they're all doing a consecration. I knew that somebody else would handle it. And I, made a few phone calls, got it all put together. And then I went with my dad, and I saw my dad's faith also change too, because he was starting to submit to God, which he had always been strong and powerful. And this is the first time he admitted, I don't think I'm going to overcome this one. And that was a really, not that I wanted to see defeat, I didn't, but it was a really big changer of, I saw my dad in a different light that I'd never seen him in before. And my husband was a huge part of this too, because he helped me understand what it meant to be a dad, what it meant to be a father, what it meant to be a man. Because I had been trying to emasculate my father. I wanted him to be like me. I wanted to understand him. And my husband helped me really understand that role of being the head of your house. And so after my dad's fall, I knew he was going to have to go to skilled nursing. And I knew that was a very lonely place. And I didn't want him to be by himself. I wasn't doing it out of obedience this time. I was doing it because I saw the need, and I didn't want him to be by himself. So I went to him every single day, and thank God he had found a place really close to my work. So I went on my prep periods. I went on my lunch. I went after school. I went before school. I would bring him a coffee. My dad and we have a love for both wine and coffee. I couldn't bring him wine there, so I brought him coffee. And we just had that time together, and we would pray the rosary every day. And in the midst of all of this, my dad also, he starts to think of this relative that doesn't have a faith. And we started praying for that person. And we prayed the St. Joseph devotion. We actually did a consecration to St. Joseph. And I would go and see him when we'd pray it. And I bought him the book from Father Don Calloway. And my dad was very engaged in it. And my dad was there for, over about 60 days. And in the midst of that, one day, my dad apologized to me. And he said, I'm sorry for all the pain that I've caused you. I hope you can forgive me. And I had not expected that at all. And I remember thinking, I've forgiven you a long time ago. I thought about Rachel. I thought about my daughter, and I had forgiven, and here my dad is asking me for forgiveness. And it was a game changer, not because to forgive someone, you don't need to have or to receive forgiveness. You don't need to wait for somebody to give you forgiveness to be sorry. I had already felt sorry for everything that I'd done to him and he had done to me. But to hear that was a big gift, because I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't demanding it. And I think sometimes when we are at odds with someone, we have this expectation that they need to be sorry, or if I ask for forgiveness, they ought to forgive me. And that wasn't anything in that moment. And it was amazing because at that point, my love for my dad grew even more. I would go there and wash his hair. He had his last birthday there. And we had planned a cross-country trip in June. And this was something we'd been planning for months because my daughter was going to graduate from high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little unsure about going on this trip because my dad was in his place, but my aunt just happened to be available to take care of him. She had a break from her job, and she said, "Go on that trip. I'll take care of your dad." And my husband acknowledged, like, what are the odds that your aunt was available just at this time? And when we went on that trip, and this is where everything comes together. When I was on that trip and I brought my rosary with me, I brought my computer, I'm writing, and we're in the Grand Tetons. And this was a place that my dad had taken me as a kid, which we had gone on cross-country trips as a kid. And I'm in the Grand Tetons and I just see this beautiful glory of splendor. And I'd been feeling, this joy with my dad finally. I'd been feeling this sorrow. And it hits me. Mary has been with me the entire time. The joy, the sorrow, the glory. That's the rosary right there. And and it all came together. And I realized I had been glorifying myself. I wasn't glorifying God. And it was a huge transition. So anyway, long story short, we came back from that trip. I knew things were going to be tough when I came back because my dad's health degressed. And 2 months later, he passed away. And, but this was that purification that Mary had given me in my grief. This was that healing. I had been looking at the rosary as a genie rubbing a lamp. You're going to get wishes. She's going to fix your life. And what she does is she fixes you. She transforms you. She removes the vices. The Seven Sorrows devotion is such a beautiful devotion because Mary also, when you pray that, she gently and lovingly exposes the vices that you have. And I realized my need to accomplish, my need to constantly do was the biggest vice. And when I just started being and I started listening to God, he was already in my life, but he became more apparent. He became that kid in the back of the line that comes to the front. So God was with me at the back of the line and brought me to the front of the line.
I have this beautiful mental image that I want to tell you about. And that is that when you were praying the rosary and not really connecting, just doing it out of rote necessity or rote responsibility or obedience, I have this image of Jesus almost kind of being up there going, "Well, what's going on, Mom?" And, "Well, Andrea, she's doing all the right things and she's so busy all the time, but she's not really engaged with her heart." And he says to her, "You have to show her the sword piercing yours."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because she'll relate to that. She's not relating with you on the other mysteries. Show her the sword in your heart and she will understand.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny you say that, Shelley, because as I continue to pray this devotion, I will get these encounters with Mary where she shows me bits and pieces. After my dad died, I was praying this and I saw his lifeless body in the hospital. And I saw the sixth sorrow of Mary, where Jesus is taken down from the cross. And I saw my father in Mary's arms. And I wept so heavily because there was that time where I felt I didn't embrace the cross sometimes. And when I saw him in her arms, I knew that he was her child too. It wasn't just about me, and that she loved him just as much as she loved my father. So it's funny you say that because she has been showing me glimpses of motherhood, and she's been showing me glimpses of what it means to truly love. I think sometimes my mom was such a good physical lover. She was a nurturer. She was kind. She was sweet. I mean, you could just connect with her so easily. She was really the gateway. My dad loved, but his love was more discreet. He always provided. My husband pointed out to me, he's like, you do have a really good father. If you just, what is joke, like if you just put duct tape over his mouth, but you looked at his actions, he was, I know, but his actions were of love.
Mm-hmm.
He never denied my mother. He took care of us. He worked very hard. He made sure that we had a faith education. He was on his deathbed. He was so concerned about that we would be taken care of. My brother would be taken care of, my aunt. He didn't think anything about himself. And that's what a father does. And Mary has revealed so much of this, and even St. Joseph, So in faith, when we're talking about grief and loss, yes, the pain doesn't go away, but it changes. My grief for my dad is very different than my mom's. And I think part of it is because I had so much that I had to work through, that the heaviness was heavier because it wasn't just about my mom, it was about me. And with my dad, he's gone. It's been a year now. And there is a peace there, but it's not a peace because he's gone. There's a reconciliation. There's a love. There's a respect. He modeled how to carry that cross for me too. Despite our arguments, everything in his actions is kind of like what I did for my daughter, he did for me.
Yeah. Andrea, that's so beautiful. I love your story. I love your story. And I love you sharing how God worked through you, with you, in you, in the beginning where you didn't realize it and you thought you were doing all the things the right way. And then he said, that's just not enough. And I'm going to take you on this journey, and it's going to be hard, but I'm walking it with you.
Yeah. And, I mean, I'm thinking about all of this, even as I talk about this, my dad, I was the daughter as my daughter was to me. And he modeled that faith, and he didn't preach, he just modeled it. And that's what we're called to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which saint? Preach always, and when necessary, use words.
St. Francis, right there. It's funny because that was the scripture that I started out with on my faith journey, and that's a hard one.
There are no coincidences. There is only God.
Nope. That's right.
Well, Andrea, I love that you're willing to come on here and share so much of yourself, and that you're using your experience to help others, to really, go. I mean, that so many people are struggling with grief, and people aren't talking about it in a way, and that you're willing to put yourself out there and create this conversation and create this community where people can feel empowered and heard, and to learn from one another on how to walk through this.
And I think what I've learned too is not everybody's ready. I am an open book. I will put it all out there, but not everybody can or feels comfortable, or maybe they're in a season where they're still trying to they have a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. And what Jennifer and I have learned about, like in this podcast, is sometimes just listening to somebody, just being an attentive ear is really all they need. Sometimes hearing somebody else's story can be just as healing. And I think we created this. I mean, there's so many different things, so many beautiful things, and so many fruits that have come out of this. We're not doing it for fame and glory. Although I could probably tell you at the beginning, I had that little bit of like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so great, but the reality is we are all called to be on each other's journey. We are all called to be the Simons and the Veronicas, to help each other, because I had those Simons and Veronicas that helped me. Father Joe was such an instrumental part of my life. And then, he died also a couple months before my father. So two very significant men in my life in different ways showed me the cross. And so I'm so grateful for that. And so in our grief journey, I think it's really important that we understand we're all part of those stations of the cross in some way. We're all part in one manner or another, whether it's the agony in the garden, if we're in that place, or if we're at we're at the foot of the cross. We're all on that path. We all come to it in different places. But God is with us in every single step, even if we can't see him. We just have to be obedient to him, and he helps us get to the cross. But I mean, that's the beautiful part, is the cross isn't the end. The resurrection, that's where things happen. So I know my Father is in heaven, and I'm not saying that just because, a lot of people think when their loved ones die, they become angels and they go to heaven. No, we have sins. We are meant to atone. My Father atoned greatly in this life, and he received the divine mercy indulgence a few months before he died. He received the sacraments. Those are promises that Mary gives us when we pray the rosary faithfully. I know he saw the face of God. I saw him pass from this life to the next. And there is no doubt in my mind that he is in heaven with our Lord, and he's with our mother. And so walking in our faith, we just have to put one step forward. We don't always have to know what to do. We don't even know how the step has to, sometimes we can't even step. Sometimes we just wiggle the toe. But we just have to have that little yes to God, and then he will take care of the rest of it. It took me 6 years to figure all of this out. And I am at a great place of peace. I will close with this summer. I went to Medjugorje, and that's a whole nother episode. But when I was there, I climbed this mountain called Cross Mountain, which is a very significant place if you go, and they have the stations of the cross. And I stopped at the stations with Veronica and Simon, and I stopped at the crucifixion. And I remember our guide asking us if there was anybody that we needed to forgive. And when I was there, I started thinking about, my children and people that they've had issues with. I started thinking of my life, and you know who I needed to forgive was myself. I needed to forgive myself, and that sometimes is the hardest. So for anyone who's listening and you're going through something, there's no wrong way to do it, but have God in your conversation. You don't have to do all of the check off the boxes of, the orthodoxy of our Catholic faith. You just need to have a willing and open heart, and God will provide everything else. You just have to keep showing up, and you keep having to put that toe forward.
That's beautiful, Andrea.
Okay. Well, that turned out to be a very beautiful, a very heavy subject, yes. Andrea. And you mentioned the Morning Glories podcast with you and Jennifer. And I wanted to tell you that you started it September 8th.
Yes.
I had looked that up before we started, that you did launch on our mother's birthday.
Yes.
Our Holy
Mother.
Mother.
That was a thank you to her. That was a gift to her.
And now it makes sense, having heard your story, to know the significance of that. And I also was thinking how when we met, you were probably in the throes of doing all the things and putting on the face. but your faith shines very strongly through you. So no matter where you were personally on that journey at the time that we all met, I want you to know that God was working in you. And we saw that because we saw the joy that comes only from God shining out in your friendship.
Thank you. Well, and I think I appreciate you sharing that, because I don't want to make it sound like my faith was all superficial until I got to my dad, because I genuinely had the desire to know and love God. But this is where God reminds us sometimes, like, go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am there. I am in the waters. I am there waiting for you. You need to go deeper. It's the journey is not over. So I don't even know what the journey will be from this point. But unlike that early grief journey with my mother, I embrace it. I didn't embrace it then. I thought I did, and or I wanted to, but I didn't know what that would look like. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to tell you one thing though. So this to give a little hope for your listeners. Mary was very present on my trip to Medjugorje through the title of Our Lady of Sorrows. So I joined the group. It was the Avila Institute. I had joined their group with Stephanie Burke. And I didn't know this when I had signed up for it at the time. But the trip had a patron, and the patron was Our Lady of Sorrows.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
There are no,
no.
see?
Oh, wait. Oh, no. No. It gets better. I got much more. So then I had connected with a relative that I had just come to learn through my dad that lived in Eastern Europe, my cousin Maria, and she's from Slovakia, which my dad is, from the former Czechoslovakian region. And I tell Maria this. She wants to meet me in Medjugorje. And I tell her about our patron, and she says, "Oh, well, that's the patron of our country, Our Lady of Sorrows." Okay. But wait, there's more. So then we're on this trip, and Stephanie tells us, and many of the other people, that when you're in Medjugorje, you never know what's going to happen. So our schedule was always changing. Mm-hmm. And one day they had planned for us to go to Zadar, which is about 2 hours away from Medjugorje. And we had gone to this church where it had the relics of Saint Simeon. Saint Simeon is, yes. Oh, no. And his body is fully incorrupt. So we can see his body there. He's mummified, but his organs are fully intact. And we were able to have a mass there. We were able to pray over his relics. And then they gave us a third-class relic to take home. So I have, actually, I brought it here. And I'm thinking, this is the man that held Jesus in his arms. He held the first body. He was the first priest to hold the body of Jesus. He was the priest that tells Mary that a sword shall pierce your heart. And I'm looking here and going, this is the sorrows of Mary. Like, Mary, you made it very clear. You let me know you were present. And this is a little, it's just called a reliquary. This is what his coffin looks like. And they gave us a relic. So I have his relic, and I ask for his intercession all the time now when I'm praying that devotion. And this is how God works when you open him in grief and strife. And here's the other beautiful part I want to tell your listeners. In grief, you will not always be in a place of sorrow. God does not want you to stay there. He has a resurrection. He wants there to be joy. He wants there to be glory for him. And our church has more feast days than it does days of sorrow, of Lent, of atonement. He wants us to delight in him. He wants that joy. So, I mean, this is the beauty of our faith. So if people are going through that cross, embrace the cross, but know that it won't be like that forever.
Andrea, that's so beautiful. I I have nothing else to say or add. That's what's so,
I
amazing.
talk too much. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
No, you are filled with the Holy Spirit, and God has given you a message. And that's what you've done and given to us and shared here today. So like all my notes just out the window. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
I
So,
think
Thank you guys for letting me share this.
Oh, no, thank you. Because I think what you've shared is so relatable to so many people. All of us either have a cross or will have a cross. It is a guarantee. And so
Yes.
your words, your experience speaks volumes to so many people.
And I think that, if I'd gone back to those first years of writing, would I have imagined to have this kind of story? No. I wouldn't have had this if God had not allowed me to go through those dark, but he's like a flashlight, he lights the way. Mary is the batteries.
Oh, I like that.
Mary is the batteries. She will guide us to her son. She will guide us to the light. So if I hadn't had those moments, I wouldn't be in that place. And so that's what I'm so grateful for. Embracing your cross brings you bigger joy than you could ever want or hope for.
That's lovely.
So Andrea, we always ask our guests about a sister story, and you've already shared you don't have a sister, you have a brother. Is there a sibling story that won't get you in trouble that you could share about you and your brother as children or adults, either your choice?
I don't know if there's a story, but I will say that my brother and I have always loved the Chicago Bears. And, I live in California. My father was a 49er fan. But my husband is now they're the Las Vegas Raiders. They used to be the Oakland Raiders. But we had gone to a football game against the Bears, and at that time, the Oakland Raiders. And my brother was there, my dad was there, my husband, my sister-in-law. I have lots of sister-in-laws, and they're all wonderful. And this was a really special time because we were all together. My dad even wore Chicago Bears stuff. And it was such a beautiful memory because we were there together as family. There was a lot of joy that day. The Bears ended up losing. My husband was happy, but it was a beautiful time where we could come together. And that has always been something that my brother and I have bonded over is sports. And I think back to that, even in our early years, we were always bonded over sports. And that has been something that even today, now that like football season is here, I messaged my brother the other day and I just said, I miss watching the game with you and with dad, and those Sundays coming together. Those are just so special. And that's the bond, It doesn't always have to be religious. It doesn't always have to be, but God is there in the midst of all of that.
Yeah, that family connection there.
Yeah.
So, okay, and our last question is there a particular saint who is walking with you right now at the stage in your life?
Well, I'm going to say St. Simeon's with me. St. Maria Goretti has been a very constant presence. And if you're familiar with her, she is the patron saint of forgiveness and of abused victims. She had been killed, and she had her accuser had stabbed her 14 times, and she came to him in prison and presented him 14 lilies. And in that moment, he completely repented. And he is not now anymore, but he was the only person at that time that had gone to see her canonization with her mother. Now, Carlos Acutis his mother had gone to his canonization. But St. Maria Goretti have been a very constant present. St. Simeon currently, and he is the patron saint of Zadar, but he's also the patron saint of expectant mothers. And he's also the patron saint of patience. And I, informally, because he saw the face of God and he waited his entire life to see the face of God. And so he has given me a great amount of hope, that when we go through these trials, there's a reason for the wait. And what are we doing in the wait? What are we doing while we're waiting for everything? This is the time that God wants us to use the most. This is where he wants our attention while we're waiting. So he's been very, very strong in my life right now. And I'm so grateful for him. And I'll share a prayer with you guys. I don't have it in front of me right now, but there's a beautiful prayer to Saint Simeon. And it's really about being a faithful servant all the way to the end.
Lovely. Yes, please send it to us and we'll include it.
I'm glad you mentioned St. Maria Goretti and the reasons why, because I almost didn't ask you the question since we'd just gone over so much of Our Lady of Sorrows and St. Simeon. I was like, no, I'm going to ask it.
Yeah, she's pretty profound. My daughter is actually one of my younger daughters has chosen her as her confirmation saint, and I didn't put her up to it. She chose her herself. So,
Andrea, where can our listeners find you?
So you can find me on AndreaBearAuthor.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook under Andrea Bear Author. And Jennifer and I host our Morning Glory podcast. We're on Spotify and Apple and many of the other streaming agents. We also have a website, morningglorypodcast.com. And morning, I want to emphasize, is MOUR, like the morning. And on our website, we actually have resources for people, books, articles, and we've also just launched an online community. So you can connect directly with us. We also have some of our guests have reached out and they're part of this community. So you can connect with other people who are going through periods of loss or grief in their life. And it's a beautiful place to come together. It's private. Where you can connect, or just maybe you just want to hear other people's stories. So morningglorypodcast.com or AndreaBearAuthor.com.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you so much. Lisa?
Andrea, I'm really just overwhelmed. And I feel, before we got on, we talked about kind of the direction we were planning. And then we talked about the Holy Spirit and just letting the Holy Spirit move throughout the episode. And I think that your testimony and your sharing was definitely led by the Holy Spirit today. And I really want to say thank you for that. I think it's going to make a big impact with our audience. Okay.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for letting me share. I don't know how to be brief. I've got to work on that. But
I think we know that because we know each other in person. So I think we all have that problem.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Really hard.
You are lovely just the way you are.
But I did feel like somebody, I don't know, because I've told it before in different parts, but I just felt like somebody needed to hear that. So,
perfect. And that's one of the things we pray for when we do the podcast is that God just opens our hearts to whatever somebody who's listening needs to hear today. So I love that. That's part of your heart too. All right. If you are hearing this message and you've listened to the entire episode, and we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We appreciate you being here today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'm going to say go find Andrea at her on her podcast, Morning Glory, and on her websites. But also, please take a moment to leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Your feedback helps us grow and bring you even better content. Stay connected with us and join the conversation on Instagram and Facebook at Sound Mind and Spirit. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up next. Once again, thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Shelley. And dear listeners, we will see you next time.
Bye, y'all.